In the vast, vast sea of crazy stories we are tracking just to stay alive these days, anything that doesn't include murder or government kidnapping or the stock market or sexual abuse might not seem important, but that doesn't mean I can't have some serious choice words for the news that broke recently that Gallup polling won't be polling presidential approval ratings anymore, which they have been conducting for over 80 years. I mean, sure, okay. Polls don't run the country, nor do they make the laws or pay your salary, but they're nice to have. They also seem to never be good. And in a world where nothing seems to get the current president down, it's nice knowing there's always something that digs in his craw, something that bugs him, something that pokes him. In fact, the final Gallup presidential poll this past December was one of the lowest they've ever had, with less than 37% of Americans approving of the president's job. Oh, that's what a time to independently ditch your one job. How very peculiar. This is Choice Words. I'm Samantha B. My guest this week is author and reporter Jacob Soboroff, whose new book, Firestorm, The Great Los Angeles Fires in America's New Age of Disaster, is out right now. After you are done reading it, and it is fantastic, take a look at the spring dates for my How to Survive Menopause tour, now up on SamanthaB.com. Until then, take a listen and make good choices. You know, it's so funny because when I was doing Full Frontal, we relied on your reporting so much.
I'm sorry.
No, so I really want to thank you for all the work that you've done.
It was the most extraordinary show, and anytime that I would see anything, I mean, everything you have done has been so amazing. But
thank you so much.
I miss that program.
I compliment you right back because honestly, like, there's no way, like, I don't actually feel that shows that rely on news segments credit the actual reporting nearly enough. And so I want to say thank you because I've just followed your career for so long. I find you to be such a voice of reason.
Thanks.
And beautiful competence in a world.
I'm an actual total schmuck in real life. But
great.
Thank you.
Me too. Okay, well, let's just dive right into the book. The book is so great. It's called Firestorm, The Great Los Angeles Fires in America's New Age of Disaster. And that is a mouthful, but it requires a big chewy mouthful because it's really huge. And I mean, anyone who was glued to coverage of the fires last year knows that you were really at the epicenter covering it. And it's so personal for you. Can you talk about that? I mean, you grew up there? In
the Palisades, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, the last thing I wanted to do was cover wildfires in 2025.
Sure.
I had been so used to doing deep dive sort of investigations and covering immigration and the opioid crisis and economic inequality and all this stuff. And my boss at the time at NBC said, "You're going to have a new job at the beginning of 2025. This is in late 2024. I was at a meeting in 30 Rock. She said, "You're going to do coverage," which is that means you're going to go out and cover whatever happens. And could be a murder trial, could be some politician saying something, whatever. Could be a wildfire if you're a journalist who lives in Southern California.
Right.
And I said, "I don't really want to do that." And she said, "Too bad. We'll reassess in 3 months."
Great.
And I swear to God, Sam, on New Year's Eve 2024, going into 25, I was sitting around a campfire with my friend, Sam Falls, and said, same thing. I said, I'm terrified that I'm going to have to put on that stupid yellow Nomex jacket and go out and cover a fire this year. And 10 days later, my hometown burned down and my childhood home burned down. And I got up from my desk the day that the fire happened. I got a text from my brother who was living in the Palisades, and I said, "I got to go to the bureau chief. That's my neighborhood."
Oh,
and
my God.
Yeah, it started 2 weeks of reporting almost every day. And at the time, it's how do you, I think I bit off more than I could chew. How do you cover your hometown burning down how do you process it in real time? And the answer is you can't. It's not possible.
Right.
It's not possible. And so that's why I wanted to write the book, to understand what it meant to be in the middle of not just 16,000 structures burning down, not just 31 people dying, actually maybe 400 if you look at the excess mortality,
Right.
3 times the size of Manhattan burned. And I was covering all this as a reporter as I watched every hallmark of my childhood, go up in flames, including the home I grew up in. And what it turns out is that it wasn't a look into my past. This was a look into the future.
Right.
And I'm so glad I had the opportunity to do the book.
Yeah. I mean, how do you even approach a day when you're experiencing something in real time? Like, it's like, I can't imagine processing that grief while in parallel also reporting on it. Like, how do you have to kind of bifurcate your brain to some extent, or are you just like raw emotion and reporting and trying not to cry all the time?
I think I definitely did.
Right.
I remember the time there were 2 times that that's not true. I'm a pretty big snowflake, as they say on the internet. I cried when I showed up to my childhood home and I saw it that it had burned.
Yeah.
Even though I hadn't lived there for 35 years, another family, the Jacobys, had lived there. I cried when Albino Fuentes, a worker from this restaurant, Cafe Vita in the Palisades, came back to meet me because I had known him for basically my entire life, and I thought about him. And I think I just cried other times sitting in the car by myself. But yeah, this was an exercise in grieving, and I don't think I actually really engaged in the process of understanding how deep the trauma was until I started to work on the book and get to talk to other people, because we were so alone there. It was firefighters and journalists, basically.
At what point did you decide, at what point did you start working on the book or feel it kind of materialize in that way? Or like, at what point did you know, I think I'm, like, were you writing for yourself and then you were like, I think I'll make a book out of it? Like, how did you know?
I didn't start writing until the fires were January 7th. I didn't start writing, I don't think, till like the White House Correspondents' Dinner weekend, which is, as you know, like April or something like that.
Yeah.
But I did start to collect my thoughts and think, I have to start talking to other people who experience this.
Right.
And not just in the Palisades, but also in Altadena. Right. I'm a big believer in therapy. Got a couples therapist and an individual therapist. And I just knew, I was like, I got to start talking about this stuff.
Right.
So I started reaching out to people whose paths I kind of had tangentially crossed during the fires, and people who I didn't know at all, like all the residents of McNally Avenue in Altadena, which is where I interviewed Gavin Newsom for Meet the Press the Saturday after the fire. But I just felt awfully guilty that, like, we were standing on the street almost using it as a backdrop. Every home but one had burned down, and I didn't know anything about anybody who lived there. And just like with family separation, when I covered that, I knew that those 5,500 children who were taken from their parents by Trump would all have a story one day to tell. And my book was one version of the first draft, along with so many other reporters.
Right.
My TV reporting was my first draft. I didn't get to grieve at all, really, during that. And as I started to have these conversations with people, I realized that we were all going through our own individual sort of grieving experience. And to start to do it collectively, was almost exactly what I needed.
Right.
I'm mentally in such a better place today than I was then, including like doing what we're doing, like talking about it, talking about the book, talking about what it was like. Because you can't, whatever your traumas are, you can't excavate them by just sitting around and letting them fester pushing them down further and further until you make like you press them together like a big Euro slab until your head explodes. Yes.
Yeah. That doesn't really work.
No, I've tried. Really trust me.
Yeah, I bet. How did you feel when you were in the moment? I guess when you were living it, were you observing other coverage of the fires? Did you think that the world was doing an adequate job of kind of like of driving attention toward the issue? And did you feel like people spent enough time with it?
I think that the local media were as heroic as the first responders. I'm talking about like Channel 4 News, Channel 7, Channel 2, Channel 9. Excuse me, the public radio stations, the over-the-air radio stations. They were like definitionally doing a public service and saying, at a time when there was a lot of misinformation or inaccurate information, the apps were how people were relying to how getting information about where the fire was. Text threads, like my own family's text thread.
Sure.
Bullshit coming from Trump about the spigot being opened and, how we could stop the fires. They were doing a public service and saying, like, this street is on fire. That house is still here. If you want to know what's happening, here's the center to go to and show up at. It wasn't me. I had the ability to like stand there and tell them about my neighborhood, and this was a national audience. It was the local folks who, man, the work they did really was extraordinary. Award-winning doesn't do it justice. It was really a public service to the people of LA. Right.
Like exactly what local news is for. Like why we need local reporting.
If there was any example of why we need it, it's like in these big mass casualty events, because they know the place better than or as well as anybody. Yeah. And I was in awe, actually. I didn't really watch it in real time. In going back and writing the book, I watched hours and hours of local news coverage to see where they were and what they were doing. And it was incredible, actually, the level of detail that they were. I think KNBC, the local NBC affiliate, was on the air for 60 or 61 hours straight without interruption. No commercials, no nothing. Anchor stayed overnight in the studio. It was really remarkable.
It's actually like pretty. It's incredible to watch that, like to watch the mobilization of like real people and real local news. When you look at kind of like the federal government and go, how are you guys such? What are you communicating? Why can't you just be human? Can you be human?
I'm so glad you brought that up because there are people within the federal government who are so capable of doing all of this. And part of the new age of disaster, fire of the future, a couple of the ways that I referred to what I experienced, make it so clear because this fire was predicted by two guys within the National Weather Service in LA, Dave Gomberg and Ariel Cohen, in the Oxnard office of the National Weather Service. They cover the LA area, and they issued what's called a particularly dangerous situation alert days before the fire and said if there's any sort of spark, it will be catastrophic. And in the aftermath of the fire, Trump was president-elect during the fire, but after the fire, he has dismantled so many things, including the ability for workers like this who are so good within the federal government to help mitigate or prevent or recover from these types of things. And it's not just the meteorologists getting fired from the Weather Service. It's the NIOSH workers who studied firefighter health and safety in the wake of events like this. It's the NASA earth scientists who are the firefighters of the future. I got to fly with them and watch them do all this stuff that I still don't understand, but it was incredible. Imaging, spectrometry to map fires from the sky using lasers to help the firefighters on the ground. The Forest Service firefighters who are so dedicated, but they were in a hiring freeze at the time of the new administration coming in. The $1 billion disaster registry at NOAA that tracked every one of these disasters for 40 years. They effectively discontinued it when Trump came into office. And so, it's like the capability is there. Right. The people, and that's where I find my hope, is like in the people always. The people are willing to do it, and they have been doing it in many cases, but the politics of the moment exacerbates the problem so much worse.
It makes it so much worse. When you talked about when you saw the fire of the future, can you describe what you meant by that?
I didn't know. I really thought, I write like fire is a remarkable time machine because it provided me this window into my childhood by showing up there and resurfaced all these old memories and stuff. But when I went to Washington, when I started writing the book, I sat down with this guy, Jonathan White, who is a career senior emergency manager, was within the federal government. And before that, I got to know him because he was a social worker in HHS during family separation. I trust this guy I would trust him with my own children. The guy's a genius.
Right.
And we sat across from each other, and he said to me, I've been to every mass casualty fire in the last 5 years, declared by the federal government, and including Lahaina, where people jumped into the ocean to run away from the flames.
Right.
And what he said was, you weren't experiencing a look into your past. You may have been, but really, given the confluence of these factors, climate change, our infrastructure falling apart, and in the Palisades, we had an empty reservoir. In Altadena, there were these old electrical towers that were dormant with high voltage electrical lines that electrified, shouldn't have been standing still. Changes in the way we live. 1,000 electric car batteries exploded, he said, during the fire, and all these firefighters were worried about getting cancer.
Yes.
And then perhaps most importantly, like the politics of blame and misinformation comes into every one of these fires. And Trump acutely and Elon Musk being on the ground as they were these incoming sort of the Doge effort was about to take off, poured rhetorical fuel on the very real flames of the fire. And so all of this is a part of the fire of the future.
Yeah. I mean, President Carter establishing FEMA,
Yes.
and his funeral being the very week that the fire
Crazy,
started, right? Just like a little, just a slight amount on the nose, actually.
So much of it. And the other story is Steve Miller's wife calling me during the fires.
Steve Miller's wife. Can you tell people the story of that? I can't believe that story. That's crazy.
So Katie Waldman, or I knew her as Katie Waldman because she was the junior most press deputy in the DHS during family separation. And she literally fell in love with Stephen Miller.
Well, he's just his value
Lovable.
System. Just the most cuddly, lovable. What a gem. What a good egg.
So cute. During family separation, they fell in love and got married. And so I oddly owe her a debt of gratitude because she let me into those facilities. I got to see the family separations for myself and got to report on them.
Great.
Exactly. But then I wrote about it. She didn't like the book, separated, my first book. And so she cut off contact. And so imagine my surprise. I'm standing there about to give a special report to Lester Holt. And this phone rings and I pick up the phone and I say, hello. And she said, hi, it's Katie Miller. I said, hey, Katie, I got to call you back. Like, I'm in the middle of this thing. I'm about to go on with Lester. But before I could call her back, my phone was buzzing in my pocket and I pulled it out and it said an address in the Palisades, and it said, it's Stephen's parents' house. Can you go check on it? And I thought to myself,
wow.
I thought to myself, yeah, that's what I thought to myself. Wow.
Wow. That's a stunner.
Am I being asked to go to Stephen Miller? I didn't even know they lived in the Palisades. I knew he was from Santa Monica, but I had no idea. And and so I said yes, because I was doing it for my brother and my friend Jake Levine, and so many people actually were calling me to ask, because I was the only person a lot of people knew who was actually in the middle of the fire when it was still going. And I went by the Miller's house and I texted Katie, and the house had burned down. And I really, truly, I swear to you, I felt really awful for them. And because how could you not? It's terrible.
Yeah, terrible.
I sent a picture of the house and I said, Palisades is stronger than politics. And I sent a heart emoji. And obviously I was incredibly, incredibly naive. And as you said, it was a little on the nose, because within minutes, Trump is tweeting the craziest shit about the fires, that he's going to open the tap and the water's going to come down and he's going to put the fire out, and the fish, the Delta smelt, is responsible for the fire, and Elon's at the command post and he's telling the firefighters about basically prodding them about the conspiracy theories about the water.
Right.
I didn't want to put this story in the book as the truth, but as a journalist, I had to, because like you said, it's so on the nose of this same misinformation and disinformation is affecting them just as much as it's affecting everyone else. Yet she still put out her hand to say,
help me.
What can you do? Yeah, help me.
What can you do for me? Well, you think you want to believe that these fleeting moments, right, of shared humanity are going to make a difference. And then the whole administration, her husband, just like instituting these unbelievable policies that are where the workers who could theoretically be rebuilding these neighborhoods where people lived, people spent their whole lives, are being rounded up in the streets. I
didn't even mention that. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I hate to break it to everybody, but it ain't the worst of the worst that they're going after. It is, and I've seen it from day one during the raids in LA, and I have been to I started here in LA. I went to 26 Federal Plaza in New York. I saw it in the hallways there. I saw it in Chicago in the fall. I saw it in Charlotte. And then I just spent a couple weeks back and forth in Minnesota. The people they're going after are everyday folks. And in LA, it is literally day laborers standing in Home Depot parking lots who want to be rebuilding houses in Altadena and in the Palisades. The same houses, the same house, quite possibly, that Stephen Miller's parents lived in that burned down. So it's depraved. Sorry to say, but it is depraved what they're doing.
Depraved is the exact word. It's the exact word. It is depraved. It's like if this can't break, if this connection can't make them reverse course, literally, I don't think anything can. Actually don't think anything can. This ideology of theirs just...
I don't think they'll ever change the ideology, but like as it relates to the raids, both the impact on the fire recovery, but also just generally the impact on humanity and what it's doing to our fellow humans, I don't think their ideology will ever change. But what I do think is that the protests that we have seen in the streets and the way that they have increased in size and in scope has freaked them out like it did during family separation. Right. And it's why they kicked, first they kicked Bovino out of LA and then out of Chicago and then out of Charlotte and finally out of Minneapolis. But now he's out. It doesn't give me any sort of solace because Tom Homan is Bovino with a suit and a tie. Sure. But it does show the power of these movements, if not to change the way that they think, to show them that electorally, if we are lucky enough to have elections, that they're up against something big.
They're up against something so huge, but it is actually, it feels so insane to be talking about these unbelievably like this brutality and then just go, well, if it's not popular with people, they might, turn the corner on it or something, or just like mitigate the harm like in the smallest possible way, just because it's an unpopular idea, pulling people out.
Do you remember what Trump said when he stopped the separation policy the first time after Ginger Thompson from ProPublica found that amazing gutting audio of the kids and the Border Patrol agents saying, oh, we have an orchestra here. Trump stopped the policy on June, I think it was 20th or 21st, 2018, with Kirstjen Nielsen standing behind him in the Oval Office, who had signed the policy initially into place herself not by saying, oh boy, I just didn't know, I'm so morally opposed to what's happening, but I didn't like the sight and the feeling of the families being separated. I didn't like what he was seeing on television or listening to in that audio. And that's the same thing that's happening again, I think, is that, as you said, this isn't about them feeling any sort of humanity.
It's like a bad scene in a cop show.
Can we cut this? Like, can we just cut that scene? It's literally, it is preposterous, but that's the documented. They've done it before and they're doing it again. So I have no problem saying the first time around with family separation, he said it himself. And that's what's happening again.
I actually can't think of I can't think of another person who I think has like tracked the inhumanity of the Trump administration with such precision as you have. And I thank you for doing that. It's just like, it's a historical log. Like you bring it all together and you make such a clear portrait of it for people. You make it real. I think that's it's an incredible skill. And you're bringing me back to family separation that time. And I'm starting to really sweat because boy, oh boy, what we're doing, it's unbelievable to me.
Thank you for saying that. And I think I, as I wrote in Separated and I've said before and said in the movie with Errol Morris about it, like I was late to all of this, and I have the good fortune of following in the footsteps of so many other amazing reporters like Caitlin Dickerson, who won a Pulitzer Prize, and Lomi Creel, who broke the story of the El Paso pilot program, and Julia Ainsley, who was my colleague at NBC and was at Reuters and discovered the policy, and Jean Guerrero, who was down at the border, found Miss L. The bottom line is, without them and without the people who came to the streets, nothing would have changed. Right. Miller would have separated 25,000 kids. Yeah. Not just 5,500. And every day, I hope, more and more of them decide to tell their own stories, because what we do is like a first draft.
Right.
whether it's the fires or family separation or whatever. They should all be able to tell their stories one day, because all of these will be in the book about the most shameful chapters in American history, as the Republican appointed judge who stopped it said.
100%. The loss from the fires is it's incalculable. Do you think that is there any possibility, or like, what does justice look like at this scale? Do you hear from the people who've lost everything about what they want to happen?
Yeah, and I think about accountability too. The book for me is because it was such a quick turn. There's so much good investigative reporting continuing now. The book for me is about the 2 weeks, and it's a minute by minute account of what it's like to have been there. And like, it sounds sci-fi, I read sci-fi, but it's so real. Mm-hmm. But the question still persists. Like, could this have been different?
Right.
What is like, as you said, what does justice look like for people? Altadena, in LA, they were two distinct fires dozens of miles apart. And in the Palisades, it was like a holdover fire from an arson fire 7 days earlier. Could there have been more firefighters pre-positioned? Could they have mopped up the previous fire better? Would any amount of water in that big empty 117 million gallon reservoir changed anything? The honest truth is, Sam, I'm not sure. I don't know. Right. And we may never know. And in Altadena, could they've taken down those towers, and would it stop the spark? I don't know. What most people say to me is there isn't really one proximate cause for any of this stuff. And there's so many colliding factors that whether or not it was this fire, in the 60s, we had the Bel Air fire in LA, and the fire department produced a film literally called Design for Disaster afterwards, saying, basically, this is going to happen again because of the way that we live. Right. In the wildland urban interface, for people who can't see me now, behind me are mountains across the San Fernando Valley that we're all living in some form of nature out here in Southern California, and many people all across the country. The accountability for me is what happens. The fissures that are beneath society often emerge in these big events. Mm-hmm. And in LA, for me, the big one was unaffordability. Immigration and unaffordability, the way we rely on our undocumented neighbors, but also, and we've talked about that, but also it's the most unaffordable city and the most unaffordable state in the country. And I saw a stat at the end of last year that was, I think it said something like 40% of people who are selling their lots are selling them to corporations, not to locals, because nobody can afford to stay.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it was 44% in Altadena. Yeah. So if it's new political leadership, that's up to the voters here, and we'll have a mayoral election for the Palisades, and on the other side of town, we got the county supervisors. But there are lawsuits against the utility in Altadena. Right. There are lawsuits against the city and the state in the Palisades. I don't know. It's sad because I don't know if anybody will ever find or feel fully like they've got justice, because when you lose everything, does it matter?
Right.
Does it matter? Ultimately,
it probably feels pretty hollow, but you want somebody to feel something.
And I feel like they deserve it. I just wonder if what I've learned and spent so much time thinking about this, again, is like, if it didn't happen from that spark in the Palisades and it wasn't about that particular place, some version of this is going to happen somewhere else. Fires burned in the Carolinas last year. They burned in New Jersey last year. They burn in the Pacific Northwest, and they have to prepare even in the winter when there's snow on the ground. So many extreme weather events. And it's like, this stuff is going to be unavoidable. So more than anything, how do we reckon with the fact that this is our reality? And what do we do about it?
Right. Well, how do you rebuild? Like, people are rebuilding now. How do you actually rebuild when another fire season is coming? And this feels like this is going to go down in the history books, and this one will be remembered. But as everybody's rebuilding, another fire season is going to start up. So how are people seeing that?
I think with great trepidation and sort of intimidation about the idea of coming back.
Right.
A lot of people really, truly just can't afford it. Herb and Lloyda Wilson, who are characters in the book on McNally Avenue, they met at UPS and worked there for 36 years and were married and have a beautiful family and a wonderful daughter, Ashley, who came to pick them up from the airport when they came back to LA, knowing that their street was on fire, and their 100-pound Akita named Rosie, who I've gotten to learn about, they had to move 10 times, have had to move 10 times in the wake of the fire because of how difficult it is to get this rebuilding process jump-started.
Right.
And of the 16,000 structures, I think less than 5,000 have been permitted to be rebuilt. And I think last I checked, it was less than 20 homes had been fully rebuilt so far.
Wow.
Yeah. It's going to take time. I really worry, I wish I had like a more rosy message about it, but I really worry that many people are going to leave and have to find other places to live because so much is working against people, not just in LA, but in communities all across the country where, I mean, I'm sure, like if you've been, I'm sure when you're on the road, like you sit in an Uber with people, that's one of 3 jobs that they have.
100%.
Usually they'll always tell you about, I do this on the side and I do this on the side, or this is my side hustle.
Yeah.
And so imagine in the homeless, unhoused capital of America, more people sleep on the streets in LA than anywhere else. All of a sudden, instantly, it's like thousands more people are made homeless.
Yes.
And it's compounded everything.
And a crisis of insurance as well. Like if you can't get insurance, I mean, it's,
yes.
I mean, that's like a whole.
People were dropped before the fires on their fire policies.
Yes.
Premiums have gone up. The payments are too low to rebuild. And just living is next to impossible, even if you don't have to rebuild your house after the most costly wildfire event in American history. So, but where I find hope is in community. Yeah. And it's in watching people, whether it's immigration folks showing up on the street and kicking Bovino out and trying to get the administration to recalibrate, or with the fires, whether it's holding officials accountable or the workers I met from NIOSH in Morgantown, West Virginia, who are protesting the cuts, the federal cuts that we talked about earlier, or just getting to spend time around the meteorologists, the wildlife biologists, the scientists, the firefighters, so many firefighters I spent time around. It makes you hopeful and a believer in humanity that there's got to be a way for us to do what we're doing. Talk about this to figure out where we go from here. For me, that's it.
Is it? And I feel like also storytelling, like letting people tell their stories is it humanizes what can be a kind of ephemeral concept. Like I think people think about fires in a very cinematic way if you haven't actually experienced one or you haven't been close to one, but it's a very different experience, up close and personal.
Crazy, actually. I mean the smells, the sights,
the sounds,
so
loud,
the physical, the heat of it.
Yeah.
All those things I think are now indelibly etched in my brain, body. I think about the firefighters like Eric Mendoza, who I write about, who's like laying in the middle of the street on the concrete on his belly because it's over 1,000 degrees and the cars are literally melting and the aluminum from the tires is dripping down beside him. And he's doing whatever he can to save any home or any structure that he could, while, by the way, going home and collapsing 2 or 3 days later because he could barely breathe. He's got stuff coming out of his ears and his nose and you name it, they were going through it.
Yeah. How are the fire? Because you mentioned previously, like the batteries exploding and firefighters just going like, well, we cannot inhale this. Like, this is really not safe. How are firefighters that you talk to, how are they doing a year later? Like, how are they reflecting on this? I
think they're struggling like everyone else and probably to a more acute degree. Speaking of great reporting, Hannah Dreyer did an amazing report about some of these health complications that not just in urban settings, but wildland firefighters are facing as more stuff that we live around burns. And Mendoza and Tim Larson and some of the folks from the county fire department, they've been showing up at some of my events. It's been really, really great to see them. But I think that a lot of them won't know for years. It's like post 9/11.
Yeah.
There have been, initial tests show elevated levels of lead and mercury in the blood of some of these firefighters. And I worry about them. Right. I know their families worry about them.
Right.
And it'll only be I think only time is going to tell, unfortunately.
Right, right. Can you talk about how indigenous communities have been doing controlled burns just forever?
Forever.
Will we ever listen to them as they are showing us how to be stewards of the earth?
You'd think. You would think.
There's so much wisdom there. Why do we so consciously refuse to accept knowledge of the ages?
Because we think that we can control nature. But when I close the book, the final chapter is a speech by Anthony Maroney, who's the chief of the LA County Fire Department. And he says to an assembled room of Palisades evacuees, basically, the Tongva and the Gabrielinos, the original inhabitants of Los Angeles, understood not to be afraid of fire and to coexist and live with it. And we have suppressed fire for so long and made it about how much defensible space should we have around our home? What type of brush clearance should we be doing so no fire can reach us or happens? When the original inhabitants of this beautiful place that millions of us call home today understood that it was fire that made us safe here.
Right.
Because the landscape needed to burn. And, I'm not a fire expert, but I'm going to spend a lot of time around many of them. And prescribed or controlled burns continues to be something that's come up over and over again. I think it's more complicated in an urban environment, but literally it was the thing that the fire chief said when he said to the evacuees, like, I can't promise you this isn't going to happen again, because look at how we live our lives. Right. And we don't do things like this.
Right. It's just kind of like an Aikido way of thinking. You just kind of it's like an understanding that things happen again and again. And if they happen again and again, there's reasons for it. It's just, how can we coexist in this way? I do feel like I'm listening to so many stories about the aftermath of the fire these days. And I'm also listening to stories about people rebuilding, and I am hearing, one thing that's pretty cool is I'm hearing about such innovative ways to rebuild in this environment. Are you hearing stories about that as well? Very
I've heard from so many people. I don't understand half of it, but so many people about using materials that they believe. And it's interesting, I've heard from people saying, oh, if you look at certain roofs with certain types of tiles, those houses didn't burn, and you can see them from the aerial pictures that they survived and the other ones didn't. I've heard from people saying, go up to Northern California and meet with these builders who have been studying, do I believe that there's certain ways of building a material? Of course. Yeah, definitely. Is it going to stop it wholeheartedly, officially, completely? I don't think so. I opened the book with this quote from Mike Davis, the legendary writer and LA intellectual. And he said, this is about the Malibu fires in 1998. He said, the exponential growth of housing in foothill fire belts, moreover, increases the likelihood of several simultaneous conflagrations and stretches regional manpower reserves to their limit or beyond. As one national forest official observed, these fires in Malibu prove that you could throw in every firefighter in the world and still can't stop it. Right. And that's 1998, And I think we've tried to outsmart fire every step of the way, outsmart natural disasters. And I don't know why we haven't learned. I don't know why we haven't learned.
Right.
Do I think that things like smarter building, better building materials, like my temple in the Palisades survived somehow miraculously, and they think it's because of the way that they built the building in the late 90s in terms of the materials and the defensible space. I don't know. Right. Or was it luck?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's impossible to know. I mean, and there is. I also hear a lot about a little bit of survivor's guilt for the one house on an entire block that has remained standing.
Oh man.
That's a lot to contend with too.
My brother, so the house he was living in was his in-laws' house, and they burned and they lost everything. Yeah. They were fixing up a house down the street because they were about to have a kid, my niece now. And yeah, their house is the only one pretty much on their block. And they're trying to figure out safety-wise, is it smart to go back with all the reconstruction happening?
Yeah.
What does it feel like to be there and have everyone else be gone. And they're one of probably thousands of people who are in that same position.
Right. Like, what does it, is it even safe to be in this premises? Like, what
But I think the guilt stuff is real too. There's a part of me that feels guilty that I didn't even live there anymore, even though I went to cover it, you know?
Right.
So much of this is tied up in, it's been an exploration for me in being better connected to myself too, my family and my community and myself. And realizing that, like, we have to slow down and think about all this stuff.
Right. Right.
You know.
Do you feel, I guess, let me pivot for just a sec, because it does feel like every day someone new says we're in unprecedented times. And I think that is, you know, that's 100% true. And then the next day something else happens and we're like, oh no, but this day is even unprecedenteder. It's very like
It's true.
But then Don Lemon gets arrested and I go, what now? What is happening now? Like,
Crazy.
how do you, I mean, this is just, you put yourself in, you're a reporter, you're putting yourself in dangerous situations all the time. How do you, are we protecting journalists anymore? Or are they just, I don't even know how to ask this question. I don't even know what I'm asking. Are we protecting journalists anymore? Is there a mechanism to protect journalists anymore? Like, is that even a consideration? Do you feel safe when you're out there in the world? What are you feeling?
The thing that makes me feel the most safe is no level of security guards, which sometimes we go out with, or no level of personal protective equipment. It's relating to other people who see us for who we are and why we show up at these places, which is just to reflect back the experiences that they're going through. My idol, when I started doing this, was, did you know who Huell Hauser was? He was like a public television icon in Southern California. He was a Marine from Tennessee who made his way to LA and probably did thousands of episodes. They spoofed him on The Simpsons. They called him Howell Hauser, and they make him literally fall off the turnip truck. This dude taught me about going out and with a stick microphone and like one camera and nothing else, and finding a way to relate to and connect with other humans. Right. And he died, but I'll go back. They have his KCET and I think it's PBS. They rerun his episodes all the time. They're all on YouTube. Everybody should go check him out. The guy is literally the original guerrilla journalist, master in his craft. The way he treated everyone with reverence and respect and admiration, you could tell how people then reciprocated that to him. And to me, that's the safest I feel when I'm out there, is connecting with people on a super interpersonal level, not as some subject matter expert who comes in to try to tell them I know more than they do, or they can learn from me. But if you can be humble enough to say, I'm here to learn from you, and I don't know anything about anything, even though I've been here before, I've seen these types of events, that's when I feel the respect and the embrace from the people out in the world. And so often I'm watching television, or there's a lot of Ron Burgundy type of action out there, you know, and that's not, I don't mean to be prescriptive. That's just not that's not the best version of me in this job. When you can be listening, when you can be reflecting, when you can be learning, that's when I think I do feel protected, actually, because I feel like they feel the respect from us.
I think that's why you connect so much with me and with my audience and my people, because you lead so much with humility and curiosity. And that's what ultimately, I don't know, it's really a beautiful thing. And your book is great. Separated is also a great book, and I highly recommend it. And I thank you for your time, and I hope you have a really successful, just a book launch that people.
Thank you.
I hope that this story and these stories stay with people for a really long time. And I know that that's hard because they've got a lot to think about, but this should be top of mind for people. I really feel that.
You know that I'm such an enormous fan of yours, and it means the world to me to do this with you and talk to you, and I'm very, very grateful.
I'm grateful to you. Thank you so, so much for your time today.
Thanks. You too.
That was Jacob Soboroff. I had no choice but to look up one thing. He was talking about how influential Huell Hauser was on his career, and I did not previously know that name. Well, Huell certainly is legendary. He hosted Visiting with Huell Hauser for over 20 years on PBS and explored every nook and cranny of Southern California in it. Also, he voiced Baxon in Winnie the Pooh. What in the world? I'm going through the archive. Thanks for joining us. I'm Samantha B. We will see you next week for some more choice words. Thank you for listening to Choice Words, which was created by and is hosted by me, Samantha B. The show is produced by Svea Baron-Reinstein with editing and additional producing by Ryan Connor. We're distributed by Lemonada Media, and you can find me at RealSamB on Instagram. Follow Choice Words wherever you get your podcasts or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership.